Hello, my beautiful people. This is Lynn Afros, and today I've taken an interlude from my homestead in the village. I'm still in the village, but I'm in this beautiful space where I come sometimes just to let off some steam and just relax. And now I'm done for the day, and I've just remembered something unique that happened some time back. There was this time that I was really, now when you're in the village, you're thinking about all the possibilities that you can, the possible business ideas that you can have to, boost your income or increase your income streams. So now I was thinking, what about poultry? It sounded like a great idea. I remember watching Farm Up and I was like, I can do this, right? And so I was enthusiastic about it and I went ahead and got a few chicks. I started with 200 chicks. There's this beautiful space here. Now this is quite good. We are close to the road right there, but I don't know whether the lighting is good. This is better, right? So I started with about 200 chicks, and I was like, let me just buy day-old chicks, and then I'll see if this actually works, and then I'll know how to now progress. So I started with those few chicks. They were just 200. A few died, but most survived. They survived, I think around 180 survived, and I was like, this is it. This is going to be good. I was really, really invested in that project. So I was making a lot of purchases for feeds. Feeds are quite expensive for the chicken, especially, and I was also purchasing stuff like vaccines and what else? I was also purchasing stuff like the vaccines and the drugs because some could get sick, and we have all the structures that you need to put in place. Structures like, for example, let's say the feeders and the light to ensure the warmth, because I was talking about day old chicks. But then again, I thought it let's go all the way to 1000. So I added another 200 chicks. Big mistake. That's where the rain started beating me. I'm telling you, those 400 chicks, now they were roughly, of course there's that mortality rate, and you remember it was my first time, so of course I was quite, not my first time rearing chicken, but my first time rearing chicken in such a high number. I'm used to just rearing a few chicken for home consumption, for eggs and for meat. But then I wanted now to do this as a poultry project. And the first mistake I made, actually, even before then, was I didn't have a structure. So I thought the space I have within the house was going to be okay. That was a big mistake because in no time the chicks were too many for the little room that I had thought was going to be enough. And then the second mistake is I bought a lot at a time. So I now have like not 400 but around 370 chicks, and they all want food. The third mistake I made, I didn't buy I didn't buy feed beforehand, and they were taking the feeds like crazy. Remember, they're just chicks and they have this light throughout the night. You can't sleep if you don't feed them because they'll make a lot of noise. So I'm having to make all these purchases every day. Actually, I was buying like a 10 kg bag every day, and it over in no time. So like if I buy today, by tomorrow around noon it's done, because they were really feeding. The good thing is they were also really growing. So I really invested, like any little cash I had was going to the feeds. So that was not too alarming, because I thought after they're big enough, they're going to give back all these. The return on investment was promising. So I kept pumping in money. And then another mistake now I made, that was not the undoing of the whole thing, was I reached a point and I was like, okay, we are spending too much on feeds. I remember I even did a video about how I was substituting to reduce or to cut down on the cost of feed. That was the worst mistake that I made. Thing is, I went and purchased a few like ingredients that I was seeing online, because all this stuff I was learning on the go. So I saw how you can use this some type of feeds to substitute for your chicken. At that time they were around 3 months. The first batch was around 3 months. They were quite big, but not big enough to be consumed. I was hoping that by the fourth month they were now going to be big enough for us to consume, but it didn't get to that 4 months. At around 3 months, that's when I noticed that the feed, I was running out of cash for the feed. I had already invested, like, let's say, over 100,000 for that project. We have around 370 chicks. They were eating like crazy, they were growing like crazy, all was going well. And then I realized, I just thought about substituting the feed. So what I did is I went and purchased grains, maize grains, and then I had it ground into like feeds. There's this machine that was grinding the meal, the maize meal into feeds. And then I was also adding some like sunflower. I added sunflower, I added cotton, I added I don't even remember. I think bone meal or something. And there was also the sardines, the dried sardines, and they were all mixed together. Now what I did that was my undoing was I came and started giving the feeds to the chicks. That was day one. No, day one I mixed. I mixed 50% of the feeds from the shops and 50% the feeds that I now had prepared for myself. And that actually did seem like it was working. The following day, I was going out to some function, so I just left someone at home and gave the feeds, the feeds that were now not even mixed, because the mixed portion was over, and I thought that was enough to now transition the chicks into the new feeding system. The other mistake I made was that to delegate. So I was delegating to these young girls. They were quite big, but they didn't really take the responsibility to heart, not as much as I could have done if I were around. So they were feeding on these really new feeds that were new to their system, and then the girls failed to add as much water as they should have taken. So looking back, I feel like it was now a combination of all these factors, that the feeds were new, the chicks were trying to get used to these new feeds, and then the water was insufficient because they were finishing the water so much. They were finishing the water so fast. So we needed to just keep refilling the water a lot. By the time I was coming back in the evening, the girls had only refilled the feeders, the drinkers only once. And usually, even without the new feeds, they usually take a lot of water. They were taking a lot of water. Like, we were refilling the feeders, the drinkers, like over 5 times in a day. And then again at night, I will wake up and refill even once or twice, and then that will be it for the day. So like 8 times in a day, and this day they were feeding on new feeds with no water. So I don't know whether it was constipation or something. I noticed that they were having blood in their stool. And so I panicked and thought coccidiosis, because that's what I had researched and thought about coccidiosis being one of the symptoms of coccidiosis being blood in the stool. But then again, I got a vet, and the first thing he asked me was, did you introduce new feeds? And I said, yeah, I did, but this was like now the second week. After I had the first week, I had done half the usual feed and half the other feed, and then now in the second week, I introduced the new feed fully. And he said it was not coccidiosis, that now the digestion system of the chicken was tampered with because they couldn't process the new feed. So we really tried to get all the kind of medicine I can't even recall that he recommended, but nothing was working. So on that following day, actually, they started dying. I woke up and they were not making so much noise. They were not so restless. Usually I will wake up and the chicken was so restless. They used to like make a lot of noise until you give them feeds before you do anything as you start your day. But on this particular day, they were so peaceful, too peaceful, much like kids. When the chicken are too quiet, it's now alarming. It's not a good thing when they're too quiet. So I went and checked, and several were already dead. That was shocking because I didn't think it was so serious. Of course, they were now getting, I was putting all these kinds of drugs into the water, and I thought that was going to do the trick. So they died a lot. Like 50 of them were already dead in the morning. I was devastated. It was early in the morning. I needed to be somewhere. I couldn't go on that day. I didn't know what to do. I called the vet. He came. I was so confused. I was so frustrated. I didn't know what to do. I needed to these chicks to stop them from dying, but they were dying by the minute. By the time the vet was arriving, another like 10 had died. So what I did, I just blocked my mind. And then I told my help to just, okay, now I'm getting even teary and emotional saying this, because do you know the picture of a dead chicken that you've really built a bond with? They're not two or three or four, they were dying in the numbers. So what I did, I just gave up and told, okay, I had already given them all the drugs that were recommended and nothing was happening after all. So I just told the help that I'll just get out of here because I don't want to see what's happening, and I don't want you to update me on how many of them are dying by the minute. Just keep burying them. So I didn't even bury even one because I just couldn't bury them. So what she did is she was taking them by wheelbarrows. I couldn't even film. I wish I had now, or maybe I wish I had told someone to film it for me. But personally, I couldn't film it. It was too emotional. I've never thought that I will be so emotional about chicken dying, but it really was an emotional moment. So what I did is I just blocked my mind, went ahead and did my thing for that day. I didn't stay around to see them die, and I came very, very late towards when the sun was setting. I didn't even ask how many had died, how many had survived. I didn't check on them. Because they were still being given, the vet was still around. He was trying to do everything he could. We were spending even more money to recover the chicken. We had to go back and purchase now the usual feeds that they were feeding on. They were initially feeding on crumbs. At that time they were feeding on, I think it was the starter. No, they had already transitioned into the chick mash at that time. So we went and bought chick mash because he said they need to now whatever the system, the digestive system, but it was not working. They were still dying by the minute, and by in 3 days they were all gone. We remained with just a few. The bad thing is you couldn't even sell them 84 meat because they didn't really have a disease. I think they were kind of constipated or something. That's why they were having blood in the stool. But you couldn't sell them, of course, because they were, for one, they were young, and again, you can't sell something that might even die on the way for ethical reasons, and you're not even sure. It's not like you did a post-mortem or something. You're not even sure about the cause of this disease, so we were just burying them by the numbers, and you have to dig a deep one, because if you dig a shallow whatever to bury them, then it's going to, the dogs were all over the compound. They were celebrating, and that is how I went from being a poultry farmer to never being one. Because by now I can talk about it, so it's like what, like 6 months later, because that was around mid last year, towards around August of last year, I think. So it's now that I can now talk about it. But I learned my lessons. If I were to do it again, I would know what to do. I'll be ready to carry the expenses from the word go. But for now, I'm most definitely not going to do it anytime soon. For now, I'll just do the kienyeji. They were the saso type, and they were the improved kienyeji saso type. And I really, really was so into the project, but the project was not just so into me. And that is how I just gave up on the idea. I'll just insert some clips that I find around here for you to see how beautiful they were. So beautiful. I could be now munching on some and even selling, but oh well, I was actually targeting the December market, but that didn't happen. So that's my story.